and we had voted then at 5 in the evening. And so this morning we're back on second reading again to continue with the other bills that are on the agenda. So the first bill then to be discussed, I recognize Senator Rodriguez on Bill 434-32. Senator.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Madam Speaker. Good morning to our colleagues. First of all, can I please make a motion to place Bill 434-32 the third reading and be allowed to briefly discuss it?
Yes, you may proceed, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 434 is an act to establish the positions of Community Health Center Chief Executive Officer, Chief Financial Officer, and Medical Director within the Community Health Center's Department of Public Health and Social Services. This measure, Madam Speaker, is to ensure that the community health centers are compliant with federal mandates. Our community health centers, as we all know, are federally qualified health centers and are required to be in compliance with 19 requirements. One of the requirements, Madam Speaker, is the establishment of key management positions, one being, of course, as I mentioned, the Chief Executive Director, the second being the Chief Financial Officer, and the third being the Medical Director. This measure seeks to fulfill the federal mandate and avert any negative consequences of non-compliance, Madam Speaker. It also clearly provides for the respective roles and responsibilities of each of these positions. What's important to note, Madam Speaker, is that any changes that this would result in terms of the pay structure of these positions, because these positions are already there but being performed on a collateral duty. One thing that's important to note is what was testified by the chairperson of the Community Health Center Board, which is the Mayor of Deredo, Melissa Savaras, is that this will have no impact on the general fund. As we know, the community health centers are revenue generating and have their own program income funds and also grants from the federal government. So I ask my colleagues to please support this measure. They are supposed to be compliant by the end of this year, and so this measure seeks to ensure that our community health centers are compliant with federal mandates. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
And Senator, then this also includes an exhibit. Yes. Okay, just want to make sure then so we don't run into that same problem again. On the motion, is there anyone who would like to speak on the motion for 434? Okay, there being none, so on the motion then to send 434 to the third, you would like to speak, Senator, 434 on the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a quick question. We are establishing positions within the agency, and I just had questions with respect to the funding sources for the positions, if the author may yield. Are the positions currently funded, and if they're not, are they to be funded this fiscal year, or are we going to be funding them and making them effective for next fiscal year?
Senator, do you yield to the question?
Yes, Madam Speaker, thank you. And if I understand the question correctly, I think I tried to address it earlier that these positions will be funded through their program income funds. And so depending on when this is, we have to first establish this statutorily, and then from there they would work on their respective budgets, whether they're going to pull it from their current budget this year or plan it for the budget moving forward. But what's important and what we're trying to do here is establish this statutorily as required by the federal mandates.
Senator, was he able to answer your question?
He was, Madam Speaker, and I'm just curious then, because I understand the need to establish the position statutorily. It's just a funding question that comes to my mind. I mean, if we're going to be, the effective date of the act says it shall become immediately effective upon enactment. My only concern is if we create the positions immediately and the law stipulates what their salaries will be for the Chief Executive Officer, it's based upon the National Standard of Community Health Center Chief Executive Officers. For the Chief Financial Officer, it's the national standard for the Chief Financial Officers within the Community Health Center instrumentalities of the United States. And for the Medical Director, it will be based upon the national standard for Community Health Center Medical Directors in the U.S. If these national standards are higher than what any of these comparable positions are currently paying, then we're going to be incurring an additional expense in the agency. And if this act is going to be effective immediately, but we don't have the funding for those positions immediately, then we put ourselves in a situation where we're having unfunded positions or unfunded increases in existing compensation based on what was currently budgeted. So I guess my next question would be, would there be an objection to us making the effective date the October 1st of 2015, which will be next fiscal year, but the act will be passed into law now, so the agency can basically say that it statutorily exists. They're moving forward with making sure the positions are funded, but we won't cross that funding threshold until we get to the next budget cycle, so we can make sure the money is available.
Senator, do you yield to the question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, I would object to that because what's important and to note is that we need to get this established and enacted immediately. And then what happens is that the community health centers are governed by a board of directors. And this board of directors now would then plan and do what they need to do in terms of their budget requirements, whether if the budgets don't allow for it to transfer some of these people or hire what is needed for these positions now, then they will do so when the funds are available there, or when they're able to get the funds through federal grants, or do some shifting in their budget.
Senator, you still have the floor, and was he able to satisfactorily answer your question?
In that case, Madam Speaker, I would like to propose an amendment, and this will be with respect to the salaries. I'm going to put out some language here in case anybody has any feedback for it, but it'll be on page 8 at the end of line 23, new language, change the period to a comma and include new language that reads, subject to availability of funds for FY 2015 and included in all subsequent budgets. That way, if the money's available, then okay, we'll fund it at that level, but if it's not available, then the salary portion of that particular position will have to wait until subsequent budgets after this current one.
So the language again would be subject to availability of funds
for FY 2015 and included in all subsequent budgets. That's on page 8, line 23.
Okay, so on the amendment, Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have no objections to that, and maybe just to make things move a little more smoother, and maybe he can just amend his amendment to allow legal counsel then to include that language in all other parts of this measure, because this one refers to the Chief Executive Officer. Maybe he can reflect it on the other two positions.
Okay, so does everyone understand the amendment a motion that Senator Rodriguez is adding, that he doesn't object to this, but that legal counsel then use this same language in the other sections where it pertains to the other positions, speaking to their salaries. That's okay? Legal counsel? Okay. So for that, okay, amendment, and there's no objection then to the amendment. But I think, Senator Agun, you did raise your hand at the time about the amendment. You want to speak on the amendment also?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Just, I guess, a suggestion in regards to approaching this, because I understand the chair and the chair of health and the sponsor of the legislation would like to move in the direction of recognizing the federal standard of compensation. But we just have undertaken a similar process in which the Department of Administration, which is the appropriate entity responsible for slotting positions within the executive branch, why don't we just transfer this responsibility and the slotting of these positions with public health in conjunction with the Department of Administration, so that it's consistent with the Competitive Wage Act that was recently adopted by this body. I just wanted to share that perspective, Madam Speaker, because I think that there's a particular conversation that I overheard yesterday by one of the members of this body that said, we need to be concerned or careful about deviating from the Competitive Wage Act, which was adopted by this government. Otherwise, we're going to have different pay structures throughout the executive branch. And I think that particular comment has come back in regards to this legislation. have the two executive branch agencies work together, and if in fact DOE, which has the authority to slot new positions in the appropriate compensation level or at the appropriate compensation level, then they rightfully should be given that authority as it applies to these new positions that are being established. So I wanted to ask the good chair of health and the sponsor of the legislation if he would consider taking that approach as opposed to, I guess, deviating from what we just acted on. Thank you, Madam.
You're basically speaking to to another issue other than just the amendment. So I think we'll address the amendment first, which is just to say that it will go into effect on the availability of funds, and that it be, of course, a part of all budgets. But yours would deal more than likely with where it shall be based upon, whereas the national standard versus the competitive wage. So just on the amendment, there are no objections. So ordered. Now on and Senator Ogden, then I will recognize you on that concern that you have if you want to, when you wanted the chairman to consider it. Okay then, so I'll let me get him, then I'll get you. Senator, then.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I understand where the good senator is coming from. These positions are not created as it stands today, and so all this language is saying that once we're creating these positions, and that now these positions shall be based on national standard of community health center chief executive. And so I believe the concern about having these positions slotted, they will be, but we're saying here it must be based on national standards.
Senator, then Yamashita, and then the Vice Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I probably should wait to hear what the Vice Speaker says, because I do echo the concerns raised by Senator Uggan, in that I'm the one who had started talking about an amendment for the OPA and then pulled it back because of the respect that I wanted to give to the integrity of the Competitive Wage Act that was presented to me as a reason not to do that right now. And it was between the OPAs, between hazardous pay for behavioral wellness, and then there was some appeal issues in front of civil service by GDOE employees. So if this too sort of unravels the integrity of the Competitive Wage Act, then I would suggest that this too be pulled back and shelved until maybe there's a Competitive Wage Act number 2, whenever that's going to occur. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Vice Speaker?
It was my concern about protecting the integrity of the Competitive Wage Act that everybody's referring to. These 3 positions did not exist at the time that Hay was doing the study. The Hay group could not have gone through and determined that the 7 people at the OPA's office or the people at Behavioral Wellness, they had an opportunity to explain to the Hay people what they were doing and why they think their salary should have been increased or augmented. These 3 positions don't even exist in government today. We're having to create them. And we're stating that the salary for this is not something that's going to be created by one of us sitting down. The salary is going to be set by a national standard. End of sentence. That's the impartial decision or from somewhere else. I mean, it's a look at what the national standard is for, and it'll be determined that way. It's not something that we are trying to decide in this hall and be subject to the pressures of political pushing, of trying to, no, I want more money. So these 3 positions are completely separate from all the positions that were evaluated in the Hay study and recommended in the Competitive Wage Act.
Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the Vice Speaker for stating what he said, and that's basically what we're trying to do here, is that these positions are not established, and all we're saying is that when they are established and their pay is looked at, it must be based on national standards. So thank you.
So on the motion, is there anybody else who would like to speak on, Senator, are you done, or is there more? Senator San Nicolas? Because that was all the subject area, I know, surrounded around your amendment, but you still have the floor. Oh, you're done, okay. So, all right, so then on bill number 334, no one wants an opportunity to speak more. So the Sen 434, the third reading file without any objection, so ordered. Resolution number 477-32. Thought for a moment that was a telephone number.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Point of order, Madam Speaker. We're going to be voting on this resolution, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to place resolution number 477-32 on the third reading file and an opportunity to speak on the resolution.
You may proceed, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Resolution number 477-32 is relative to respectfully requesting that the University of Guam and the Guam Community College consider establishing a Section 529 qualified prepaid tuition plan. What we're basically asking in this resolution, Madam Speaker, is that the territory adopt a prepaid tuition plan that's already been adopted, or similar plans have been adopted in 49 states, the District of Columbia. The way these plans work, Madam Speaker, is basically a parent or a grandparent can pay for their child's tuition or their grandchild's tuition or any beneficiary's tuition in advance and lock in the price of tuition today so that by the time that child goes to college, when they reach college age, they will be able to go to college at the price that the parents or the grandparents or the benefactors paid when they initially locked in those credits, as opposed to having to pay at the higher price so many years later. I ran into some high school friends of mine when we were at the mall, my wife and I, and we were eating in the food court. And they came up to us and we were just chatting about different things, and they brought up the issue of tuition and how when we first went to the university, it was about $63 a credit. Now it's into the hundreds and hundreds of dollars per credit. And that's an example of how if we're able to lock in tuition prices early, we can save so much money for our people and increase the chances of people being able to go to college years later. If prepaid tuition plans existed back when I was in high school and credits were bought when it was $63 a credit, you would have been able to send your child to college for a whole lot less than the amount that it costs today. And statistics indicate that college tuition year over year increases at a rate higher than inflation, 7 to even 10%, and sometimes even more. And so we've also seen at our university that policies are in place to be increasing tuition annually as part of their growth plans for the institution. So in order for us to be able to make sure that college is going to be as affordable as possible for all of our future generations, it would be a good idea for us to encourage the university and the Guam Community College to adopt prepaid tuition plans so that our people can be locking in tuition rates now for the benefit of whoever they want to send to college in the future. One of the other advantages of these prepaid tuition plans is that the university or the college will be able to get that money up front without having to actually bear the cost of the student being in the system. So for example, I have a 7-year-old son, and if I buy all of his credits in advance and it costs, let's say, $20,000 or $30,000, that's a $30,000 injection today into the university or into the college that they can invest, that they can use to expand their programs, that they can use to build new buildings or what have you, and benefit the institution immediately so that it becomes even more attractive and more effective in fulfilling its mission because it's getting more infusions of capital. And all they'll need to do is be able to guarantee that when my 7-year-old turns 20 or 19 or 18, that when he goes to college, he's going to be able to have a full ride, basically, because it's already been prepaid. So the university and the college will benefit by getting cash up front and being able to invest it for the benefit of its existing students and its current mission. The beneficiaries will be able to have a higher education locked in, at least the cost of one, and the opportunity to attend one. And the parents, the grandparents, or the benefactors will be able to say, you know, I've already gotten college taken care of, I paid for it already, I don't need to worry about it 10, 15, 20 years from now. And something like this, Madam Speaker, will be an excellent financial planning tool. I mean, let's say, for example, that you just have a newborn baby and you want to make sure that they're able to attend college. All you got to do is sign up for a prepaid tuition plan and put away so many dollars per month. And by the time that child reaches 5 years old or even 4 years old, you would have already fully paid for their college education. You can sit back and relax and not have to worry about where you're going to get the money for college. And that is an incredibly powerful tool, because without being able to accurately forecast, we do know that college expenses are just going to go up over the years. That's just a natural occurrence. And so by locking it in, you're able to not worry about that. You have peace of mind. You can focus on other financial planning priorities like retirement, estate planning, all those kind of things. So I humbly ask my colleagues to consider passing Resolution 477-32. I think that'll be a really good tool to put into the hands of our community. It'll be a really good thing for our future generations, and it'll also be a win-win for our higher education institutions, who will be able to get the capital up front and invested in the improvements of the university and the Guam Community College. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the motion, is there anyone who would like to speak on the resolution? Resolution number 477, that's relative to considering establishing a qualified prepaid tuition plan for all your grandchildren. There being none, so no. Then on the motion to send Resolution 477-32 to the third reading file without any objections, so ordered. We have only 2 more bills that for us to consider right now, which is 413 and 332. So I'm going to proceed then with 413, and we left off, this was set aside, and we had left off with an amendment or amendments that Senator Nicholas was putting together, and my understanding is that we should have copies of them. So Senator Nicholas, we'll go ahead and start, and you can tell us which ones you want to start with.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We will start with the longer of the 2 amendments between lines 12 and 25 on page 3 of the bill. This was the amendment that I spoke at length about. I won't belabor the point, but if you just read through it, you'll see that it intends to put a stay on any property seizures until the public auditor has gone in and audited all the property tax records that are older than 10 years. If any record is in error or unsubstantiable, it will be reported to Legislature in Guam, and the legislature will have so many days to act on this report. If the legislature does not act on this report, then the statute of limitations as outlined in the bill will kick in. Anything older than 10 years will still be effective, and prospectively, anything older than 10 years will no longer be applicable. But if the legislature does act based on the findings of the auditor, then we can make the 10-year statute of limitations apply immediately. So it'll allow us to make an informed decision, Madam Speaker. We're looking at old records. We're looking at records here of unpaid property taxes. We're talking about whether or not we want to expunge or not expunge these records from the rolls. We need to have the auditor go in and validate whether or not there are any errors, or if any of the any of the records unsubstantiable. So that's what this amendment seeks to do, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
On the amendment, Senator Limtiaco, you recognize.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I was, in reading over the amendment, I was referring back to the bill that was substituted in committee, and the reason why we substituted on the floor is because this same section there had some flaws in it, and one of the main things was the involvement of the public auditor in this whole process. So I went ahead and reached out to the public auditor and said, hey, take a look at this and see whether or not it's even doable in your eyes. And as the amendments that were made as substituted by committee, she was very specific that, one, she doesn't have the resources to do this. She doesn't have it would take away from other duties of her office that she would otherwise use. Originally, the amendment also had that she had to complete it in 180 days. And she was very clear that that's just not possible for her to do. As well as the fact that the original amendment said that if there was one lien found in error, then it expunges all liens. I have her statement via email that says, hey, I'm not in favor of this. This is not good for the government. Now, the new amendment rectifies some of those flaws, but still, it does not solve the problem either, because what we're saying here is now it's going to become the legislature's duties to determine as well. Do you have the time, Madam Speaker, to do an executive function, nor do you want to? Do we want to start intermingling the branches of government once again? We take it out of the public auditor's hands, now we put it in the legislature's hands? Additionally, Madam Speaker, we're talking about, this is something that you referred to in another bill that we heard on that wasn't subsequently passed as well, is the effect of those lost revenues on the Territorial Education Facilities Fund. Now, the administration has already reached out, and the bill has provisions in there for the Director of Rev and Tax to work with these individuals that have outstanding taxes and liens are placed on their properties. Work with these individuals. Let's figure out how to make sure that the taxes get paid, see what amnesty programs can be afforded to relieve them of the burden of any penalties or interest charges that may have come. But let's attempt to collect on the revenues that are due to the government so that we can support what we always talk about every election, is to support education. Now, you had mentioned a figure that's just roughly under $20 million. That's inclusive of the penalties and interest, I do believe, as well. But still, every dollar that we can spend and allocate and distribute to the Department of Education to help our children's educations is a dollar well spent. And thus, we cannot just expunge the past liens because we want to make everything consistent at 10 years. But what the bill does is it does prospectively change the statute of limitations from 30 to 10 years. Okay, so we acknowledge we'll move the statute of limitations from 30 to 10 years going forward, but let's still do our due diligence and make sure that we collect on those tax revenues that are still owed for those liens that exist prior to the enactment of this law. So although the current amendment fixes a lot of the flaws in the original amendment, I still object to it. And I ask for my colleagues' support in saying, hey, let's just let the administration do their job. Let the Department of Rev and Tax do what they're supposed to do, mandated by law, and just have them work with these taxpayers to make sure that we can fairly collect on what's due to the government so that we don't affect the revenues that otherwise would be lost. So once again, Madam Speaker, I object to the amendment. Thank you.
On the amendment, Senator Dueñas.
Just Masi, Madam Speaker. And, I rise to agree with the retiring speaker. And I just want to make two simple points. As well as what the retiring speaker talked about, a piece of legislation that I voted actually in favor of yesterday when we talk about the effect on our tax base, on our education. Perhaps maybe down the road, and if I would have been thinking about it. And the reason why I supported it is because it was prospective as well. It would actually go and capture the revenues. That would be in addition to. current tax base. But specific purpose, I can understand the difference. Perhaps maybe there's a middle road at some point with that policy. But keeping to the point, you know, Madam Speaker, I cannot help but continually go back to the power of this body and the ability of the committees, the oversight chairs, all those who put their hard work in every day to ensure that the balance of power exists within our tripartite government. And, you know, I spend my fair share of time up at Revenue Tax and do my business there. You know, I understand some perspective when it's put out there in terms of a penny, $1, $100, and all of the representations of you know, things that would seem skewed in terms of what the effect and rule of law would be on and what we're doing here. I just speak more to the reason of the retiring speaker, though. I shun and hate to say that we have boogeyman government employees up there at Revenue Tax that aren't sympathetic and understanding to the realities of things that would be and could be construed as just way out of whack in terms of how you apply proof of you know, your payment of taxes and what, you know, those you know, revenues mean. But we have to protect the integrity of the revenues. That's why we went down this road, Madam Speaker. You know, that's why I think if I see anything with this policy, I see one thing that is definitely true in terms of the outcome. And that is to ensure that we derive as much revenue as we can to support education. And when we do that, it allows the government and additional revenues to go towards other things that need to be taken care of for our people within our government. So, Madam Speaker, I rise in support of the objection, and I don't think I can overstate the fact that this is not to say that we don't understand that we need to protect our people. We need to protect people that owe 1 penny, that owe 50 cents, that owe $1, that owe $100. And regardless of how that tax roll rolls out with regard to that, but I also, once again, have to reiterate, I believe in the integrity of those employees. I believe in allowing the executive branch to do its job because I know this body has the power, when needed and when warranted, to ensure that that check and balance is exerted and that those employees who are involved in the executive function of this government would come down here and account for their actions as well as the oversight exists within this body. So thank you very much, Madam Speaker, to allow me to speak to support the objection of my good colleague from Tumuling.
On the amendment, is anybody else who would like to speak? There being none, Senator Nicholas, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this amendment is seeking to do only one thing: have the auditor look at the records and provide this body with a report. And if she looks at those records and in her report she's able to say that there are no errors or everything can be substantiated with records to validate that these amounts are owed, then okay. If there are some errors, at least that's going to be in the report too, and we can as a body make a judgment call and say, you know what, yeah, there are some human errors, but overall, this report shows that everything is in pretty much good standing up there, so we can go ahead and move it forward. That's all this amendment seeks to do. It's a compromise that I'm proposing from the original bill that I introduced that was just going to expunge the records altogether and make the 10-year statute of limitations apply immediately. The governor vetoed it. There were some concerns about whether or not there's parity in that. So now all we're saying of this amendment is, okay, the auditor has to look at it. And if she looks at it and she reports it to this body and we don't do anything based on her report, then the law as it's written will take effect. Which means that nothing is going to get in the way of this actually becoming law and being enacted unless we get a report that compels us to act. I don't see why we're going to be objecting to getting information that we can either act or not act upon. Why don't we want to see whether or not these records are substantiable. Why don't we want the auditor to look at these records? Why do we want to just let them go ahead and move forward with the process without double checking? This isn't a small matter, Madam Speaker. This is a process that can take away people's property. Over 6,000 properties. Maybe more, because it's based on individual names and the amounts that they owe, but it could be amounts that are owed on multiple lots. 6,000 individuals. Now, when we first were discussing this whole measure in my original bill, it was made, public statements were made that a new version was going to come out that was only going to say businesses. Only those businesses that owe property taxes. That's not the case anymore, Madam Speaker. This is everybody. This bill is going to apply to businesses, manamko, the estates of those who have passed on. If somebody was a single parent and they had a child and they passed on, this could be some kid's property. And all this amendment is saying is, let's bring the auditor in to have her look at the records and to report back to us on what her findings are. And if her findings are glaringly obvious that there's a problem with these records, then we as a body can make a judgment call and we can say, you know what, yeah, we shouldn't have the statute of limitations stay in force all the way back to 30 years, even for the existing ones, because there's just too many errors in the rolls. So I don't understand why we don't even want the auditor to look at this stuff. Now, the original language that I proposed in the committee version did say if there's one error, everything will be expunged. But again, it's another compromise. This is a compromise to compromise. Now we're saying, okay, you know what, just send us a report. And if we don't act, then everything kicks in. But at least, let's make an informed decision. As a legislative body, let's make an informed decision. When we communicated with the auditor also with respect to this, she did say that expunging records based on a single occurrence would be problematic. And that's why we took it out of this amendment. But for us to say that she doesn't have the resources or the time to be able to do this, this is her job. This is her job, to make sure that records are sound, so that when this government takes action, we can be confident that it's being based on fact. So we really need to make sure the auditor looks at these things and reports back to us. It was mentioned that, we have all this money for education and, that's why we should just move this forward. Madam Speaker, these are property taxes that have not been collected for over 10 years. Why are we all of a sudden going to magically collect them today? Some of these property taxes have not been collected in over 20 years, all the way up to as long as 30 years. So for us to say that, oh, this is money that's for education and we need to get it for the kids, that's not entirely accurate. Because if it was that easily accessible, when education was short last fiscal year, why didn't we just collect all this money to make up for that shortfall? The reason, Madam Speaker, is because a lot of these records, in my opinion, based on just looking at the data, are very difficult for us to close on. So we need to be upfront about the fact that this isn't money that's just waiting to be collected and it's going to all of a sudden all go into education. We've been talking about this measure. My original bill was introduced months ago. This government has known about this months ago. These have been on the books to be collected for years. And in spite of all this talk and all this process and going over this for the last so many weeks, we still have all those property taxes that are uncollected. If it's very clear that there are measures moving forward to deal with this, and if those property taxes are so easily collectible, then why aren't they collected today? Why aren't they collected today and sent off to our education system so they can have this $20 million infusion? The answer, Madam Speaker, is it's not that simple. It's not that simple. And if it's complicated, that means that the records need to be looked at even more closely. That means that the auditor needs to come in and audit all of these property taxes that are older than 10 years. And if they're fine, then let's move it forward. But what concerns me, Madam Speaker, and the reason why I'm so stuck on this, isn't just because I want to make sure that, we take care of our manamko. That's important. I definitely want to do that, but that's not the only reason. It isn't because I have questions about the records. It's because of a conversation that I had weeks ago when I first introduced my version of the bill. I was having lunch, and I ended up sitting next to a very wealthy individual. And this wealthy individual leaned over to me, and he told me, he goes, I really, really like what you're trying to do about that statute of limitations. And I was very shocked. I said, why? And he said, don't mention who I am, but I want you to know this. Consortiums are being formed right now. Groups are being put together right now to, as a collective body, buy up these properties. I was invited to be a part of these consortiums, and I said no. But they're being formed up right now to acquire these properties and put them to a different use. Now, again, Madam Speaker, if the due process is there, if the records are intact, and if it can be proven and clearly illustrated that we acquired a property from a taxpayer in the right way, then okay. But after that conversation, and in trying to just compromise on this, just to make sure it's being done right, now all I'm saying is let's have the auditor look at it and report back on what it looks like, and we still don't even want to do that. We shouldn't be taking people's property if we cannot take it the right way, Madam Speaker, if it's not rightfully done. That's all I'm saying. Let's have the auditor look at it and make sure we're doing this right. That's what this amendment seeks to do. I humbly ask my colleagues to support it. It doesn't derail the bill. It just provides us with the information, and it gives us an opportunity to act if the information shows that we need to act. But if the information isn't compelling enough, then we don't need to act, and everything can just go on as it's already being proposed. And it's the right thing to do. I humbly ask my colleagues for their support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. There, of course, are objections. So I'm going to ask our members, so those in favor of this Nicholas amendment, to please raise your hand. We only received 5 votes, so the amendment failed. Senator, you're recognized for another amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My other amendment is for Section 8. Section 8 reads, the Director of the Department of Revenue and Taxation shall be authorized to administratively take action to collect and resolve delinquent property taxes. Now, on the surface, it looks like it just, makes sense. They're authorized to take action to collect and resolve delinquent property taxes. Isn't that what they're supposed to do? But when you dig below the surface a little bit more stuff comes up. And the biggest and most glaring thing is that the process for seizing property and auctioning it off is not adopted in the rules and regulations of this government. It hasn't been adopted through the Administrative Adjudication Act. And so by passing this section as it stands, it could be interpreted that the director can just go ahead and move forward with auctioning properties without having to go through the Administrative Adjudication Act. And why that's important is the Administrative Adjudication Act will require that those rules and regulations that he would have to form to auction properties be given a public hearing, be presented to this body, and this body can take action in case those rules and regulations are in any way unfair or unjust to the community. But if we don't require that he go through that process and we just let this section stand, then he can just go ahead and begin moving forward. It looks to me like blanket authorization to just move forward. And so my amendment that I circulated for page 4, section 8 would add at the end of the word taxes, subject to regulations duly adopted pursuant to the administrative adjudication law. This will require that the director go through the AAA process before he begins auctioning any properties, because that has not been adopted in the AAA. So I'm asking my colleagues to please support this so that we can make sure that properties don't get taken and sold without the AAA process being fully applied. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, Senator Lim Tiaco.
Madam Speaker, if I could just ask for a brief recess so that we can determine whether or not how this applies to the current laws that exist. If I could ask for a 5-minute recess so I can meet with legal counsel regarding it.
All right, we're going to take a recess. The legislature is back in session. Senators, Lim Tiako, I know you had asked for a recess so you can have a conversation with legal counsel. And
Thank you, Madam
you
Speaker.
guys
Madam
do have the
Speaker,
floor.
part of the conversation with legal counsel is that there are already existing laws that that cover these issues. Provisions in UCC, foreclosure, specific foreclosure laws, such as a private power of sale. However, you know, I have no objection to adding that section into Section 8, so no objection.
Thank you very much, Senator. On the motions, anybody else who would like to speak on the amendment? So on the amendment then, since there's no objection, so ordered. Those are the only two amendments you had, Senator?
They are, Madam Speaker. The second one was, the second amendment was something that I just wanted to tighten up, but the first amendment was something that I was, I mean, it's a deal breaker for me, Madam Speaker. This bill is intended to address multiple things. One of them is also extending the deadline for the filing of the extension for real property tax exemptions. We're going to extend that deadline to January 23rd, 2015, which means that the urgency for us to act now this month of December is not as pronounced because technically we can take action in January. That being the case, and being the chairman of the committee that reported this bill out, I would like for us to reconsider this entire action in the 33rd Guam Legislature versus trying to move it forward in this 32nd. And so I'm asking my colleagues, as the chairman of the committee, to please support me in referring this bill back to committee. And I'd like to make a motion to refer Bill 413-32 back to the Committee on Aviation, Ground Transportation, Regulatory Concerns, and Future Generations. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On that amendment, Senator Lim Tiako, you recognize.
Madam Speaker, I object to the amendment. Or, excuse me, I object to the motion.
Okay, so on, there is an objection then, so all in favor of the motion to send Bill 413 back to the committee? All in favor, please raise your hand. I only received 4 votes. It failed. On the motion, then, you want to close, Senator Lim Tiako, on 413.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to thank the body for participating in the debate on the bill, as well as the amendments that were proffered that try to strike a compromise on some of the issues with it. Madam Speaker, as you had mentioned in part of your testimony on other bills as well, you know, securing the money that is available for collection on these liens, you know, to go towards the Territorial Education Facilities Fund is something that this body shouldn't and cannot ignore. And I think that the body has spoken today by moving this bill forward. Additionally, you know, I was trying to wrap my head around why are there so many attempts to block several of the bill from moving forward and to basically expunge a lot of the records. And something that struck me as extremely troublesome was the retiring speaker's basic synopsis of a story of some person leaning over to him and telling him that, hey, there's this conspiracy theory that is going around, so why don't you write legislation to support it or to defeat it? And Madam Speaker, I would hope that nobody in this body
Point of information, Madam Speaker, the bill that I drafted was before that conversation took place, so it wasn't drafted based on any conspiracy theory. That information was shared with me after the bill was already introduced.
Regardless, Madam Speaker, it's just I would expect that none of the individuals in this body would base legislation on that, or pursue even amendments to the bill based on those type of conspiracy theories. The other issue is, you know, the question came up several times as to why haven't we collected this money in the past? Why has it taken us so long to even initiate potential foreclosures on these properties? And Madam Speaker, it's very simple. We are inherently good and empathetic people. That's what makes our culture so unique and so identifiable with all of us, is that it's enough Amalek. Nobody wants to do this. Nobody wants to foreclose on anybody, and that's the whole thing about what the governor's veto message had said, and what many of us in this body would otherwise also support, is that let's work with these individuals. This is not to put anybody out. This is to, one, collect on the revenues that are due to the government, but do it in a fashion such that we're working with these individuals. Let's open up an amnesty period, just like we do at the hospital, and forgive some of these interest charges that have been applied, or some of these penalties that have been applied. Let's just collect the taxes that are due. Why hasn't it occurred in 30 days or 30 years? Madam Speaker, because nobody wants to do this to our people. Nobody wants to go out and foreclose on property. That's why it hasn't happened in so long. But nonetheless, we cannot allow it to continue. But if we are going to continue going forward, let's do it in an empathetic manner and make sure that we understand that what we're really just trying to do is collect those taxes that would otherwise go to the Territorial Educational Facilities Fund. Let's look at opening up amnesty programs to forgive the interest and the penalties that are due. And let's make sure that every 2 years when we come back in and we talk about education, that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that those funds that would otherwise go towards education are not only collected but used in those manners to improve our children's education. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I ask my colleagues for their favorable support on the third reading file, and I ask that it be sent down to the third reading file.
Then a motion then to send 413 to third reading file without any objection, Senator. There's an objection. There is an objection, so all in favor then of sending 413 to the third reading file, please raise your hand. 8-3. It's a requirement of 3 calls for a roll call vote. We're voting on the motion to send 413 to the third reading file, and there's an objection. And of course, the person who objected is requesting for a roll call vote, but we need 3 calls for a roll call vote. I've only received 1 so far. So, is there a second roll call for a roll call vote? And a third? Okay, then there being none, so all in favor of sending 413 to the third reading file, please raise your hand. Okay, we did receive 9 votes. So on the motion then to send 413 with the 9 votes, so ordered. Bill number 332-32 LS. Senator Munya Barnes.
Si Diyos Masi, Madam Speaker, and then Manana si Diyos. Madam Speaker, if I may, I'd like to put Bill number 332-32 LS as substituted by the author on the floor on third reading, and I promise to be very brief on this.
So, wait.
So it's
you've
the
got a
substituted version?
So
and
motion
it's on
to
the floor.
accept that first.
Okay, so motion to
So
accept.
motion to accept the newer
Substituted.
version. Substituted version.
By the author on the floor.
By the author, right, on the floor. So are there any objections?
And that's an LS, Madam Speaker. LS.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
No objection, so ordered. And then now for replacement.
If you can, Madam Speaker, if I may, put Bill number 332-32 LS as substituted by the author on the floor on third reading, and like I said earlier, I promise I'll be real brief.
Okay, you may proceed, Senator.
Madam Speaker, this Bill 332-32 LS is a companion bill, so that my colleagues can remember, to Bill number 287-32, which is now Public Law 32-186. And Madam Speaker, as you may remember, this was a two-part transaction that sought to exchange 2 lots within the Chamorro Land Registry with a portion of a lot in Chalampago, which was reserved for the Department of Public Health and Social Services. Madam Speaker, I want to note that there has been some opposition to the transfer of the lot that was originally proposed in the original version of this bill from some residents in the area, and some have raised some valid safety concerns because of the proposed property, which is currently situated on the cliff line. But Madam Speaker, I want to note that in order for us to complete this transaction, I am proposing that we allow the Department of Chamorro Land Trust Board of Directors be allowed to identify a lot, a suitable lot for transfer to accommodate a foster care facility for the Department of Public Health and Social Services. Madam Speaker, I say that is because I'd like to believe that everyone in this body understands the critical need for this foster care facility. When the original bill had a public hearing a couple of months ago, or several months ago, there was support. We heard from the likes of Sister Bridget, who's been an advocate for our children in the community, for those less fortunate children who've gone through some hard times, and she's been a big advocate for helping them. We've heard from the stakeholders, and at that time I don't even think we received any opposition. But with that being said, Madam Speaker, there was a request to really look at the situation on hand and look at the safety concerns and the environment concerns of where this facility may be located at. And by working this substitution, Madam Speaker, it just gives the opportunity for all the stakeholders to continue to come together and really work their due diligence. But we understand that the critical and the vital need to take care of our foster children is very important, and we take that as a priority. And this is why I'd like to ask my colleagues to help support me in this effort to facilitate having this program, this facility for our community. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this Bill 332-32 LS as substituted. And I hope my colleagues can find it in their hearts during this season to consider this bill and give it its approval. Sana Masi.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, Senator Yamashita.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to speak in support of this compromise measure offered by Senator Barnes. There are a couple of issues I wanted to review, but before I do that, as the senator said, we hope that everyone understands the plight that is faced by these children who are removed from their homes. I think anybody who reads the news can see that we do have a serious issue across our community. Very often our children there are reports of neglect, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and what happens then is CPS removes them from the home. Sometimes you have families who can take those children, sometimes, but many times we don't. I've been in many, as you have been, many forums where the foster parents are there. We have a limited number of foster parents across our island, and CPS and Public Health Social Services is trying to create more incentives and give more support so that more families can open up their homes to give an emergency setting to these children who find themselves in a plight that was of no work of their own. They were being kids, and then all of a sudden they had nowhere to be. And the last time I heard, we On average, we have about 40 foster kids looking for somewhere to live, and we might have about 30 who are able to be placed. But what happens is, because there's no rules and regs to be a foster, I mean, if you have a foster care child who's attached to a breathing apparatus that you're really not sure how to work, you're hesitant to take that child and that breathing apparatus into your home. You're not sure if you're going to know how to work work it right, and you're worried about ensuring that that child is safe. If you have a foster child who has a mental health challenge, it's scary. I mean, I admit it. It's scary to say, I'll take that child, because you don't know what the triggers are. You don't know how to prevent them, and then what to do when they do spiral into an episode. And it's just, that is the type of situation we're talking about, that Public Health Social Services is trying to build a facility, an emergency facility, a temporary facility, and eventually, of course, everybody knows that what we always try to do is return the children to the families. But sometimes it takes a while to help those families know how to be. Sometimes the courts would decide you're not going back to your parents or your guardians. Sometimes that happens. And so this has been controversial, and it's been on the table. It's been referred back, and so I thank the senator for coming up with compromise language that perhaps takes away the particular lot that was originally being addressed as a place. And the reason why, I think everyone knows, the reason why that particular lot was being addressed, that is by Healing Hearts, is said that those foster care kids who need some care from GMH or behavioral wellness are located, the proximity is there, so that they wouldn't have to travel very far, and those arrangements maybe are easier. But this body always listens to what stakeholders say. I mean, even though we're accused of not having public hearings, I know we always have public hearings, because I'm at most of them, and we just, our doors are always open. And with the concerns that are raised, then this will allow Chamorro Land Trust to identify a lot that can be exchanged and then can be given to Public Health Social Services to build a foster care facility for our children who need a temporary setting, so that they may be safe at night, so that they can be somewhere during the day, so that they can go to school from this place, and so they can go home from school. Foster care is always temporary. And then hopefully we can work on having them have families where we know how to do it right, and that they don't have to be removed from the family. So I support this. There might be a concern with I need to sit down. I just got a text message about the lot number designation, so I'm going to look into that, or maybe the author can look at it and make sure that that's correct. But Madam Speaker, I do have an amendment to specify the purposes of this land transfer. And on page 2, line 14, just to make sure that we know that it is going to be used for a foster care facility, this is what I ask that our members consider. On line 14, after the word trustees, it would be for the purposes of a foster care facility which shall be built by Department of Public Health Social Services. That's so that this doesn't get lost, and it is specifically for foster care. I ask the consideration of that amendment.
Can you, one more time, read it? For the purpose of foster care facility,
Comma, which shall be built by the Department of Public Health Social Services.
and shall be built,
Which shall be built
which shall be built.
by Department of Public Health Social Services.
Okay, so on the amendment, which is on page 2, after line, on line 14, after trustees, for the purposes of foster care facility, comma, which shall be built by Public Health and Social Services. On the amendment, Mr. Vice Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I hope that no one doubts my concern for foster children. I devoted 10 years of my life to this. I spent many weekends speaking to Catholic daughters, women's clubs, every club that I could possibly think of on this island during those 10 years, asking individuals to please open up their homes. We established therapeutic foster homes for children who need therapeutic assistance. There is no need for public health to be building a new facility. They can't operate it. If this Regalu board would get together with the Sanctuary board, there may be one of the 3 buildings at Sanctuary that was built at Sanctuary that might be available for a temporary home for foster children. I don't understand the need for another building, another edifice. The 3 buildings at Sanctuary in Chalampago were for the very specific purpose of addressing the needs of temporary placement of children who have been taken from their homes. When I first started in juvenile court, it was initially just an apartment. Then we were renting homes. A home, a house. And it finally became there were too many children. And we were trying to separate the age groups and separate those that are long-term and those that are just short-term. During that period, Sister Bridget had the Ali a home that took little babies and children. Sanctuary had the middle-aged and the high school students. I'm afraid that if we build a building, an edifice, it's going to end up to be an orphanage. What this community needs to do is to dig into their hearts to that empathetic belief that we are and open their homes. These children should not be in a building. They should be in a home with a family, not 10 workers. We can't even pay Sanctuary. There was a fundraiser this last week where 2 of the board members had their birthdays and had a silent auction, and it was a fundraising to raise money for Sanctuary because the first quarter payments out of this administration had not been paid. If there are, of the 147 children that are foster children right now, if any of them are over 11 years old to 18, they can be placed at Sanctuary. There's 3 buildings there. Yesterday, I almost voted against the bill for the Cancer Trust Fund because they wanted to increase the administrative cost. You know how much I love the administrative costs. We fought over that with the endowment fund for DOE because I was upset with the administrative costs for the UOG one. I was willing to give the additional for the education program. When I asked Public Health how much they thought that we should increase that 10% to, or whether or not that was going to be sufficient, they wanted 30% because they were not going out and getting the grants to be able to do the education outreach. When the First Lady established Regalu, I went up and I thanked her because she was able to go from 13 foster homes when they first came into office 4 years ago to now 33. She was more than double the number. And I congratulated her on her efforts because I thought maybe it just was me that people didn't want to. But I tried to elicit the support of the Archbishop when I appeared before many of the Catholic women's organizations. Our Christianity, our Chamorro culture of taking in. The embarrassing thing is, of the 33 families that are currently foster care parents, most of them are military. I'll repeat that again, Madam Speaker. Of the 33 homes that are foster care, they are the majority of them are military families. I'm embarrassed. But these two nonprofits need to talk and try to figure out what it is that you're going to do. With the name of the foundation being Regalu, I thought it was gifts. At least that's my Chamorro translation for it. Gifts. I thought that recognizing the fact that public health and social services, the amount of stipend that is given to the foster care parents was insufficient to actually take care of a child, to meet the needs of a child in a home. I thought that the thing that gifts that a Regalu would give would be to augment that, like during this Christmas season, where I know the court has divided up the 147 children, and each of the divisions is responsible for buying presents for the 147 children. I was talking to the administrator yesterday. But I thought that the foundation would say, all right, if you take this child in as a foster care child, and we know that the $300 a month that we're paying you is insufficient, we will provide all the health care needs. Not health care needs, because I know Senator was trying to deal with that, foster care needs in health insurance. But we will buy the supplies for school. We will provide the clothing. The $300, of course, is not going to be enough for you to pay for this child's clothing, but we will pay for the uniforms, we'll pay for these, and we'll help. I was hoping that was going to be the incentives that this group was going to provide so that more people would be willing to take. This Christmas, I'm already receiving Christmas cards from Missouri, from Arkansas, from New Jersey. Because when I was the family court judge, I had military families serve as foster care parents. And then when they left, they asked for custody of those children. And those kids are now living on the East Coast and the Midwest. Because we couldn't, with our culture, our Christianity, and our empathy, take them in. Public health wants to build a building and try to operate it? They should be coming down and talking to us and telling us what they need to make the foster care program more attractive. How much would it cost to take up the stipends, the monthly stipends? What would make it more attractive? I've not gotten any letters from public health on that. I don't know if the health chair or the youth chair has gotten it, but I know I haven't seen anything on that. What would it take to make it more attractive so that there would be more than 33 families? So we could have 147 families. The need is not another edifice. Bricks and mortar is not what is needed. What is needed are homes with love and care. And it needs the rest of us in the community to support them through the Regalo Foundation or any other foundation to assist in providing Christmas presents, monthly getting their uniform at the beginning of the year, whatever. But another building is not what is necessary. Because if that fundraiser this last weekend was any indication, there may be a vacant building in Chalampago in a couple of months. There may be 3 vacant buildings in Chalampago in a couple of months. And I would be very hurt by that, Madam Chair, because I was the chairman of the board that built those. And maybe it was too big, and the programs kept getting bigger and bigger. But if the two groups would get together, maybe one building could be for babies and little toddlers. One building would be for the middle schoolers, and the other one for the adults. You don't need a whole building for staff. That was not my intent when we built those buildings. We have the brick and mortar that's up. We just need people who will take them after a temporary placement. And I'm just afraid that if we build another building, it will become an orphanage. And at that point, I will be glad that I'm 63 and nearing the end. Because to think that on Guam, we are now building an orphanage after we built a senior temporary placement because of abused adults in Santa Rita, I'm embarrassed to be here. That's what our society has gotten to. That the 2 big buildings that we built this year was a 10-bed temporary placement for seniors that are being abused by their families, and a building to take care of babies and children that are in foster care because we've had to take them away from their parents. And the push to build a new prison, a beautiful society to be coming from. I'm sorry to be just this upset during this time of the year, Madam Speaker, but it just is unnecessary to be building brick and mortar. We need to try to figure out how to make foster care more attractive to those willing to take them. You know, and looking at your red jacket, I remember I was at a red ball a couple of years ago, and a couple came dancing up close to me, and the man said to me, "You know, Senator, I need a little help. We're therapeutic foster care parents, and we hadn't gotten paid in a couple of months." Until we can get the foster care program that's being run by Public Health and Social Services to pay the therapeutic foster homes and the foster care parents on a timely basis, until we can get DYA and DOA to pay Sanctuary on a timely basis so they keep up their operation to take the temporary placement of these young individuals, we don't need another building. Thank you.
You're welcome. After that, I think we need to take a recess. The legislature is back in session. And we were on the motion. And Senator Yamashita had spoken earlier with an amendment. And then after that, of course, we had the Vice Speaker had spoken, and we took a recess. So that's where we're at this morning. Mr. Vice Speaker, I know you had the floor at the time for the recess.
Madam Speaker, first I want to apologize to my colleagues for my having lost it, but this has been something that I've been dealing with for the last 30 years, and the need to address this. And I really do think that more discussion is necessary. I'll be the Grinch at Christmas and ask that this bill be sent back to committee.
So there's an objection. All in favor of sending it back to the committee then? Okay, there are 3 calls for a roll call. Yes.
Senator Tom Atta. Aye. Senator Tom Atta, aye. Senator Tony Atta. No. Senator Tony Atta, nay. Senator Uggan.
Absent.
Senator Uggan, absent. Vice Speaker Cruz. Aye. Vice Speaker Cruz, aye. Senator Duenas. Aye. Senator Duenas, nay. Senator Limtiaco. Nay. Senator Limtiaco, nay. Senator McCready. Senator McCready, absent. Senator Morrison. No. Senator Morrison, nay. Senator Munya Barnes. Senator Munya Barnes, nay. Senator Respicio. Yes. Senator Respicio, aye. Senator Rodriguez. Yes. Senator Rodriguez, aye. Senator Snickles. Yes. Senator Snickles, aye. Speaker Wampat.
Yes.
Speaker Wampat, aye. Senator Yamashita. No. Senator Yamashita, nay.
It fell. Yes.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. Before you call the vote, I move that the senators not present be excused.
Okay, so on that motion, no objections. So ordered. To send Bill 332-32 LS to the committee, it received 6 yea votes, 6 nay votes, 2 excused. The motion failed. So then, we would have to continue then in the discussion of the motion, the amendment. And the amendment then, which is from Senator Yamashita, which is on page 2, line 14 at the end of trustees, for the purpose of foster care facility, which shall be built by the Department of Public Health and Social Services. So in favor, please raise your hand. The amendment failed. You still have the floor, Senator Yamashita. Well, you made the amendment so while you were speaking.
Right, and sorry, and so then that would be pretty much it. It was just to specify, and you know, since I was actually also speaking on the main motion, I'm the first one to say that human services on this island has not been a priority. Human services on this island has not been put in the middle and talked about, and the collaboration, as the Vice Speaker has said, has been absent. And while I wish that the homes were open and I wish we didn't have to go through this, it was through the work of Regalo Foundation and the work of Ali'i Shelter and CPS that said that right now they do need a facility to turn into a home as an emergency care, and that's why we're representing it. And that's why I'm being dogged about it. That's all. I understand. He's been doing it for 30 years. I've been living it for 30 years. I understand. And we need to get somewhere where we do talk about Inafamalik and Chamorro. And we need to get there, but we need to do something right now as well. And that is why I objected to putting it back. I already know it's going to fail, but at least we're making a statement. And I do know that in the 33rd, with the administration, I believe that Senator Calvo will now make this a bigger priority. And my guess is the 33rd Guam Legislature also will be having their share of roundtables and rendering their action plans. So I thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the, to go back to my list, you're right. Senator Ada, Tom Ada, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, in this past hour, we've been basically discussing the need for to support the foster children program and whatnot. And so I guess there's many competing interests here. While we want to provide the services for that segment of the community, I think we also need to take a look at what we are doing in order to be able to achieve that. And I've always thought that a good policy is policy which addresses the needs of a certain segment of the community while protecting and preserving the rights of others within that community. And so I think that unfortunately the way this bill is that it does not do that. It basically seeks to address the needs of a certain segment of the community at the expense of another segment. So let me just get to be a little bit more specific about what it is that I'm talking about. First of all, if we take a look at Section 2, we're talking about basically 2 tracts of property. We want, the bill is basically, well, while it doesn't say it specifically now, really indirectly it may end up that way, but initially this whole effort was to take property in Tamuning, over there adjacent by where the Guam Memorial Hospital is, where it has all the infrastructure that it needs. It has access roads, it has water, power, it's flat, it's easy to develop, it's easy to construct on. And we wanted to take that property, and in this bill, there's nothing that prevents this from going back again, because we're basically saying, yes, you can go ahead and use Chamorro Land Trust property and exchange it for this property up in Ordat Chalampago that's called Asinan, and it could very easily end up back there again, or some other easily developable Chamorro Land Trust property. And so the way the bill is structured is, first of all, the exchange is going to be made on an area for area. And so, you know, although the bill doesn't say it here, that's the way it started out, was we were going to take property in Tamuning, highly developable, probably, I'm sure, a lot more valuable than the property up in Asinan. Now, the bill describes that we're going to use property that's up in Asinan in lot number 3470, which was set aside for under the land reservations for Gov Guam properties or operations. And off that lot 3470, which has a total area of 117 acres, 22 acres of that was set aside for the Department of Public Health. So let's be clear that actually when we talk about exchanging public health property that's been set aside for public health with Chamorro Land Trust property, we're only talking about 22 acres. And in the last session, when this legislature passed a bill which has now been enacted to exchange a Chamorro Land Trust property in Dedido in order to be able to build a lab, it was to be exchanged on an area for area basis with that property up in Asinan. So 1 acre in Dedido, highly developable, has infrastructure to be exchanged for property up in Asinan, which we'll get to the description of that in a minute. So it seemed that probably the compromise then was for the 1 acre of property up in Dedido, it is to be exchanged with the 22 acres up in Asinan that was set aside for Department of Public Health. And so already the Department of Public Health has used up the property that was set aside, that was reserved for it, for that property in Dedido. Now, this property in Asinan, let's kind of take a look at the whole area in Asinan. This lot 3470 consists of 117 acres, total acres. And 22 of that was set aside for Department of Public Health, but that's no more. Now that 22 acres now belongs to the Chamorro Land Trust inventory. And in fact, in that last bill that was passed, we wanted to make sure that, at least we weren't down in the gullies by the river and all that stuff. So the law was very specific that the property that was going to be set aside out of lot 3470 was going to be in the northwest corner, I believe, where it seemed, just in looking at the map, was most accessible. And we were making that decision down here without the benefit of having gone out there and actually do a land survey. So at least we think that we picked the best part of Asinan to give to the Chamorro Land Trust property. But here's a description of the Asinan property according to someone who's very familiar. Because of this lot's location, its topography, access, and flood zone designation has to be researched thoroughly. I've been to this lot. This is the individual that was explaining this to me. I've been to this lot, as with every lot in the Chamorro Land Trust inventory. This lot fronts the Asinan River, which separates Chalampago and Jonya. The access point for this lot, not necessarily its legal access, is an extremely steep hill, and that most of the property is prone to flooding, especially during rainy season. So what are we doing? We're taking good developable property that belongs to the Chamorro Land Trust, which could actually then, if the Chamorro Land Trust wanted to, could lease out that property, the developable properties that it has, to generate funds to be able to begin surveying the properties of the other unsurveyed Chamorro Land Trust properties, start building up funds to put in infrastructure. But no, we're going to exchange that. This bill basically says we're going to exchange that for property in Asinan, which probably even the farmers would tell you is probably not even suitable to make gualo. So what are we doing now? So, we're taking valuable property from the Chamorros and exchanging it with property up there in Ordot that probably even the Chamorros would say is kind of difficult to get in to farm. Is that fair? I don't think so. And I think the only reason why we don't have the Chamorro advocates down here, it's because they probably don't know about this. And I assure you that if they did, they'll be down here letting their voices heard that, hey, what about our interests? So, Madam Speaker, and it is clear from the bill that because the appraisal requirement is being waived, that obviously property is going to be exchanged on a value for value. I mean, on an area for area, which is quite a deviation from what is normally done. When we exchange property, it's on a value for value. You take a property that's valued at $1,000 and you exchange it for a property that's also valued at $1,000. But if you were to equate that to an area for area, obviously an acre of property in Tumon or in Tamuning is going to be a lot more valuable than property that's like in Asinan. And so on that basis, that was why in that last bill, we all voted to exchange I think it was 2 or 3 acres of property in Dedido for the entire 22 acres in Asinan that was reserved for the Department of Public Health. So, Madam Speaker, I think, everybody's talking about Inafa Maulik. Well, let's also talk about Inafa Maulik, about what we're doing to the Chamorro Land Trust program. And maybe because they're not here and we don't hear their voices, it's not right that we also take away valuable property from them and besparatanay ni ang bagasus. Siguro nudo na kuman masenti este ni tautaw tagi huzog na este para matsogi para matsuli tano ni sinya ma atkila huzog para paragwaha sa lapi ni po para mamidi todo siya tano giulo sa sinatanay huzog itautaw ta loay sa para tatsuli sa para tana atulay ka. And we're going to give them something that's not even probably good enough for Gualo. So, in as much as, I certainly would like to see us help give support to the foster children program. I don't think it's right that we do it by taking away from another group of people, our Chamorros, who are just as deserving of the support from this government. So, Madam Speaker, I certainly cannot support this bill because of how we're doing it and who we are negatively impacting in trying to help somebody else. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Senator. To continue on to the list, I also have Senator Duenas. Then Senator Respicio. Then the other one is, of course, the Vice Speaker as well. He spoke in an amendment, but now you're in the main motion. No, okay, so that has exhausted then the list. So Senator Respicio.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it seems like, there's so many issues before us, and some issues compel us to support the bill, and some issues compelled us to support the amendment to move this back to committee, only so that those competing issues get reconciled. Madam Speaker, I rise to express that although this bill, as substituted by the author, is being presented as compromise language, because I understand that we're at this juncture because we received a letter from a former senator who is a resident of the area, who very articulately and intelligently talked about some of the safety issues that should have been mitigated involving the site, because the property in question is on a cliff line. It's the road that takes us into the Guam Memorial Hospital, so it's a high traffic area. And the former senator certainly makes it very clear, as I'm making it clear today, that we support the Regalo Foundation, the advocacy of Sister Bridget, And also there's an agreement with Tamuning Mayor Rivera that we should work to provide these unfortunate children respectful care during the traumatic period of their lives. And so this is what she's presenting to us, and certainly I would lend my support to making this letter a part of the record, but also a supplement to the committee report. But I rise to express that if this bill is being presented as compromised language because of what was brought before this body in terms of how the due diligence has to be certified that their area is suitable. If you look at Section 2, and the previous speaker alluded to this, if you look at Section 2, it removes the legislature entirely from this process. It simply says land exchange is authorized. They're going to authorize the land exchange with a suitable lot within the Chamorro Land Trust inventory. So they can go back, they can identify the same property, they can identify any other property, but how then will the legislature and the governor through the legislative process ultimately be able to determine that property that they identified is suitable to accommodate this kind of program? And so I think that's why there was, for several reasons, but that's why I voted to send this bill back to committee, or let's just address it now. We need to provide an additional step, and so that if the Chamorro Land Trust Board of Trustees determines that the site, whatever the site is suitable, I think then the normal course of the process would be that the governor would introduce the bill, or maybe the sponsor again would introduce a bill showing that the Chamorro Land Trust Commission by resolution adopted a certain site and they believed it to be suitable, and they can demonstrate that they determined its suitability based on the following criteria. I mean, I'm almost tempted to define what we believe should be suitable, but I don't think we can arbitrarily come up with that listing. So I want to, if the sponsor would yield, is it the sponsor's intent then that if this bill were to pass and becomes law, that whatever site the Chamorro Land Trust Board of Trustees identify, there is no further legislative intervention, there's no more intervention from the governor by way of his executive authority to sign or veto the bills that we pass? Would it just then be whatever site they identify, including the current site, that will be the site that they would select to be able to move forward?
Senator, do you yield
Madam
to the
Speaker,
question?
that wasn't the intent. The intent was that this issue, knowing the urgency of providing this facility for our foster children, that this issue going back 23 years and really looking at this, that all the stakeholders would come together. And my simple answer to that is no, that wasn't the intent, to block everybody out or this body out.
Okay. Senator Espicio, are you satisfied with the answer?
Yeah, absolutely. So then would there be any objections if I work with legal counsel to craft language that further vets this process to make sure that the recommendation is transmitted to the legislature and that it would be entertained by the same manner of which a bill is entertained in the legislature? So can I ask for a recess?
Okay, we're going to take a recess. And again, senators, we're very close to noon, and so what we're going to do then, that rather than just taking the recess to craft an amendment, that would just go ahead and take a lunch recess and be back here at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you.